Okay,
Yeah,
all
she
set.
was in the car. She had the
You're all
engine.
set. You're live.
Patrick, we got a meeting, 6 o'clock.
This guy's on the phone.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the April 22nd, 2013 meeting of the Town of Wareham Board of Selectmen and Sewer Commissioners. May I have the roll call, please?
Present is Selectman Whiteside, Selectman Holmes, Selectman Titlebaum, Selectman Slavin, Selectman Tropiano has not arrived yet. Town Administrator Derek Sullivan.
Thank you. Next, please.
We have no bills nor documents to sign. Next up is appointment of Selectman member to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay. Last week, we decided that that was going to remain me, but we need a vote.
Motion made to appoint Selectman Titlebaum to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Second.
Anything to be said? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 400.
Next is the Community Events Committee. Someone else has to make the motion. 'Cause I'm-
Yes, we need someone other than Selectman Slavin to make that motion since he's the presumed nominee.
I'll make a motion for Alan to serve on the Community Events Committee.
Second, Mr. Slavin.
Anything to be said? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 400.
Next is the School Committee for Contract Negotiations. I make a motion to appoint Selectman Whiteside.
Second.
Anything to be said? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 400. Moving on? Yes.
Okay.
Unless you want to, let's take these out of order if possible, because I would like for Selectman Tropiano to be here, possibly to vote on the agreements. So if we could start with,
Oh, have you talked to him?
I just left the voicemail.
Message.
All right, well, let's just put it on the list
Yeah.
and just get it done.
No,
Okay.
that's what the board wants to do. Doesn't matter.
By the time he gets here, we'll be done.
First one is the Wareham Clerical Union. It's a memorandum of agreement entered into by and between the town of Wareham and the Wareham Clerical Union employees, Local 1249 of Laborers, International Union of North America. Where-
Oh, you reading
I'll
it?
just read a little bit. Whereas the town, the
You
union...
read the whole-
No. Are party to a collective bargaining agreement for a period July 1st, 2008 through June 30th, 2011. Whereas the town and the union have, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 150E, negotiated the terms and conditions of a successor agreement.
Move that we...
Second,
Let's have a motion.
Motion to go ahead and accept the clerical union, local number 1249 agreement.
Second.
Anything to be said?
Has anything changed since the last meeting on that?
No, it's the same as the last.
Same as before.
Okay.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 400.
Sure, it should be important just to note that the clerical union did do it's a two-year contract, FY 12-13, and it is 2 years with zeros on the base. There is a step increase to bring them in line with the other unions, and a one-time payout of anybody that did not achieve that step payment of $200. But the important part is 2 years with zero COLA or adjustments or zero to the base.
Yes, we thank you and Labor Council for achieving that, and also the union for its good sense in negotiating this deal and helping the town out.
It's
Yes,
the
it
same.
Yes.
When you start reading things into the record,
Yeah.
it makes me wonder when it's the same.
No, we just didn't we didn't say it. If somebody's watching, they didn't hear how many years it was,
Oh.
they didn't know anything about that, so that was
Right.
important.
Derek felt it was important, I believe, to get that on the record, as the prior discussions were all in executive, so nobody heard that. This is the first time this information has been disclosed. Why don't we move along?
Okay, just as one quick point, we agreed for the 2008, 2011, but included 11 and 12.
This one
Or
is for
12 and 13.
12 and 13.
Okay, the last one was for 8 to 11 only.
The previous one was cleared up from 2008 through 2011.
This one has the same,
Bullet B, bullet B,
yeah,
right there.
Yeah.
Right where your thumb is, down.
yeah.
Right.
No, but this one also has 2008 to 2011 in it. Okay, next one is the wastewater treatment plant, and that's the wastewater treatment plant operators. And this memorandum of agreement is entered into and by and between the town of Wareham, Town, Massachusetts Labor District Council, Wastewater Treatment Plant Operators Union. Whereas the town and the union are parties to a collective bargaining agreement for the period of July 1st, 2008 through June 30th, 2011. And whereas the town and the union have, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 150E, negotiated the terms and conditions of a successor agreement. And the successor agreement is for 2012 and 13.
Second.
Is that the motion?
Yeah.
Second, okay. Any discussion on this matter, other than Mr. Sullivan do the same conditions apply with this one?
Correct.
First, as were discussed previously with this board, and secondly, are they similar in nature to the ones that were negotiated with the clerical union in terms of the 0-0 raises?
Correct. It's for fiscal 12 through 13. It is zeros on the base for those times. There is a step 7 added to bring them in line with the other unions, and there is a one-time $200 payout for those that do not qualify for the step. And again, that payout does not go forward. It is one time, and is the same as what we discussed in the executive session.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 4-0-0.
Next up is the 61A land conversion pond at Faring Hill. Basically, we can go ahead. The last committee was open space. Unfortunately, they did not meet last week because they didn't have a quorum, but the 30-day time frame is passed, so therefore we can go ahead. And I would make a motion that we do not exercise our right of first refusal on the property at the pond at Faring Hill, 61A land conversion.
Second.
Just briefly for discussion, we have in fact heard from all of the land boards at issue who, under 61A, have a right to put in for this property, correct?
Yes, I have them all here.
And every single one is declined, correct?
Correct.
Then there's nothing more.
Well, actually, the open space is not, but therefore they didn't meet, and they have to meet our policy is 30 days. So they haven't met that.
Okay.
So therefore-
So either the boards have failed to act or have actively declined.
Correct. Made the motion.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 4-0-0. Thank you. Next.
Next article is discussion of town meeting warrant articles. Mr. Chair.
I left this in carryover from prior agendas, just to explain to the board what's happened since we last met, jointly with the FinCom and the school committee on Wednesday night. I have reached out to Chairman Vugan of the school committee, and I've also spoken multiple times with the acting chair of the FinCom, Frank Heath. The intention, and they are both aware of this, is for me to present a motion to table discussion of the budget, which is Article 6, as well as the other money articles on the agenda. You each came in, I gave you a handout. The first one will be the motion I will read if the second portion of the consent agenda, which does contain some money articles, goes through. The second motion is the same as the first, only it will include those money consent agenda articles if that motion fails, so that those are also covered in the June 18th meeting. The reason for this was the board certainly, during our Wednesday meeting, exhibited great concern over the possibility of passing an unbalanced budget. This is a risk, again, that the DOR has told us not to take. In my estimation, it was a risk to be avoided at all costs. I spoke multiple times, again, with the other chairman, exhibited my concern, and informed them that I would in fact be making this motion. The moderator is aware of it. Town council is aware of it. Mr. Sullivan is aware of it. And again, it needs to be made so that we can meet with the school committee and hammer out a balanced budget. The feedback from Mr. Heath was neither favorable nor negative in particular. He did exhibit a concern that he would like this accomplished soon enough so that the FinCom would have the ability to, again, go through and make their recommendation. And after discussing this with Mrs. Vugan, both of us agreed that this should take no more than a month and that we should be able to have this done by the end of May. That should be plenty of time for the FinCom to go through it between the end of May and June 18th.
May I remind the chairman that I will be leaving on the 19th of May and not returning until June, I think it's 6th.
Yes, and with that in mind, Massachusetts general laws, and I forget which one and where it is, but they allow for telephonic appearance. They allow for appearance by Skype. The only thing you have to do is whatever body adopts this policy, which in this case would be the Board of Selectmen, has to offer that option to all boards in town. We can't just do it ourselves. So if there's a lot of work left to be done on the 19th, or it looks that way, then that's an option we can present to the board so that we can still continue to obtain your input. Now, understanding that you're going to be how many time zones away? 5?
I don't know.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's the other side of the country.
Yeah. It's almost in Siberia, so.
I think it's 5.
Yeah,
I think it's 5.
I think it might be 5. So, you know,
I'm
you're
not-
going to be, when we meet at 7 at night, you're going to be 2 in the afternoon, if that's the case. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Okay. I just want to make all of you aware of that. I'm
Oh,
willing
yes.
to do whatever it is that I need to do, but I'm also willing to, leave what my recommendations would be so that, in other words, I'm willing to work harder on the things that might be bigger and leave you. I don't know how I get away with, voting on them, but certainly my intent would be to do whatever.
Well, we appreciate that. And again, if it comes down to it, and we're looking for your vote, hello
I'm on it.
Skype,
Okay, yep,
if we need to.
okay. Thank
So
you.
that's generally what this is.
Thank you.
It avoids this body doing something tonight that would put us in great jeopardy with the Department of Revenue. It avoids this body doing something tonight that would make it nigh impossible to work back from an unbalanced budget. I just, again, I'll use the analogy again. This is egg salad sandwich to me. I can't choke down an egg salad sandwich, and I can't choke down an unbalanced budget. And so I think that was the flavor of the board that we got the other night.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, it's not up to you to decide what the flavor is.
Well, these negotiations had to,
I'm going to be serious about this now because this is in less than a week. Wednesday night, there was this quasi-poll going on that violates open meeting laws. Now you've given a whole list of people that you've discussed this with, and not on that list is the Board of Selectmen. You've discussed it with
that's
Mr.
why this is
Hogan,
on here
you've had
tonight.
several conversations with the Finance Committee Chairman, and you listed several others, Town Council, but nor has there been a discussion with the Board of Selectmen.
But that's what he's bringing it here tonight for.
right.
It sounds like these decisions
are
are
last-minute
already
things.
made. This is an afterthought. This is the last step here. It's not up to you to negotiate for the board unless we tell you to do that. But we take a vote on that and have those discussions take place.
If I may?
Hey, I'm just saying that you're not negotiating on behalf of the board because we never took a vote to ask you to do that.
That's correct. We did not take a vote, but there was certainly an intent, I think, evidenced by everybody except me, who, you know, I did change my mind. I was willing to go along with that, but I think that we were all uncomfortable enough with the situation that we needed guidance through our chair.
Well, I think, again,
Yeah.
all I'm saying is you can't be off doing this stuff on your own without the board authorizing that to happen. Because that, I don't know if it violates anything, but it certainly issues a trust factor here. I was never asked whether this should be done or not.
Well, again,
And maybe you had 3 votes to do it, but I don't recall that taking place. So all I'm saying is you need to be very careful with this stuff, because then we always did this in public, and now it's being done not in public, and that's an issue for me. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
just be careful.
well, let me ask you, now that we're here and discussing it, let me ask.
All I'm saying is the discussions have already taken place with all these other boards, because you claim to have some flavor in I just think that's a little outside the jurisdiction of the chairperson to
Well,
determine flavor of the board without a vote. That's all I'm saying.
fair enough. No.
Because I don't know what took place in those discussions. So I don't know if I'd support that or not. I would only ask, that my second question on this would be, why is there 2 motions if you've discussed this with the moderator was the other person you said you talked to? Well, why would she have money items on a consent agenda if you were concerned that that wouldn't pass?
Well, these are annual rollovers. They're not, perhaps Derek could explain them better than me, the money consent agendas, you can put them in the terminology better.
All I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, I say it in public, is that this stuff needs to be done in public. That's all.
Money consent agendas are annual articles that we usually can bring together to have town meeting vote on ahead of time, as they usually flow. They're passed, so to say. So the reason for 2 motions, I would say, is town meeting has to approve the consent agendas. If they don't, then you need a second or a different type of motion to accomplish what we're looking to do here. So we cannot decide for town meeting or the voters what they're going to do. So you would have a backup in case they did not decide to take part of it as a consent agenda and would like to bring it up.
Right, and my follow-up again is, if you're trying to forego money articles until June 17th or the 24th, right?
I thought it was the 15th.
It's actually going to be the 18th. I typed that up
sorry.
before we
Sorry.
figured out the
Sorry.
availability
That's
of the hall.
changed too.
Okay, yep. 18th?
So if you were going to do that until the 18th, why wouldn't you forego all money articles?
Which is what this one is, right?
Right, but I mean, why wouldn't you
Well, that's
just
if the
do it
body
up front?
does.
Right, we would like to forego all money articles, but it depends on what town meeting's appetite is for
Right,
that.
so I would
I
think
think that's a
that,
really good question,
I think
Mr. Holmes.
that would have been the motion to me, is to take all money articles and not put them on a consent agenda and leave them by themselves. Because this is going to be confusing now.
So are you recommending that we go with the second one because it includes all of the money
That's
articles?
what I would say. If we're going to look at some money articles, we should look at them all. Right?
And if we're not going to look at some money articles,
Right.
then we should not look at any of them.
right?
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
Because there'll be confusion,
Yep, that's right.
and we're trying to keep this clear.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Mr. Titlebaum?
It does. I'll bring this to Madam Moderator's attention, and perhaps she will then choose to forego the second portion of her consent agenda, which includes Articles 12, 16, 17, 18, and 20.
Which I believe were ones that we were going to pass over anyways for those money articles. They were not
They
going to
just
be
did that
heard.
backwards, didn't they? The first one is less inclusive than the second one,
Yeah.
Mr. Titlebaum. So
That's
this,
correct.
Yes.
Right.
Because it says if the consent
Right.
agenda passes, meaning that they put monetary articles
Right.
on the consent agenda.
Right, these...
Why
so-
would you do that? If you're going to try to forego, question, if you're going to forego monetary articles to be reviewed prior to passing a budget, why would you pass a bunch of them?
Any of them.
Why would you pass any? Correct. That's probably the best way to put it.
The easiest way to put it is the ones that are described, 10, let's call them 12 and such, we were going to pass over anyways. There are ones that we
When you say you're going to pass over,
they're not to be acted on. One was, let's say, the $50,000 are tabled. The one was $50,000 for the harbor master. You do not need that because that's already within the budget document. So you would actually be voting on it twice.
so they're not on a consent agenda.
Well, that would be what the
If you're going to
moderator.
pass it over, they wouldn't be on the agenda. I'm just trying to figure out what you're doing.
The moderator would request that she's going to have one consent agenda that speaks to the annual articles, such as the elections,
Right.
and so forth. The second one would be ones that we've agreed, and by what I mean by agree is if it's a town department that has put it forth, it's unneeded. It's not one that we'd like to have go forward. So we would have those to pass over. Now, the rest are ones that you'd see in there, 6, 7, 8. Those are the true budget articles. 6 is the budget itself. I think 8 is the water pollution control. 9 is EMS. Those are ones that we wouldn't table unless we were in this situation right here. So that's why I believe there would be this almost third put together, if you will. But I can understand.
Somebody can explain that clearly to
I believe the
150 to 300 people.
I believe the moderator is going to go over that. She's got a list of, in her consent agendas, why they're being passed over.
Why they are being omitted from the consent agenda? Is that a better way of saying it, or
No, there's the
No.
consent agenda of the ones that happen every year. Like I
Right,
said,
the election.
Right.
Okay.
So let's call that consent agenda 1.
Okay.
Then there will be a second one of articles that we're going to pass over, not table, but actually pass over, like the harbor master one, for instance. Another one was taking money out of...
It's no action then.
Right, you're essentially taking
Okay.
no action.
All right.
Those we wouldn't ask. Those we don't want to fall because a lot of them we will not know how much is in that
In there
account.
until,
Right.
right, okay.
So although we traditionally did those as well in the spring, we shouldn't. It's not the best way to do it. So this is that part's kind of change a little bit of the way we do business and make it more in line with how we should be doing it.
Are you as confused as me?
This is the stuff, this is the stuff we're not gonna do anything with anytime. We're not gonna
Well,
spend
I
it.
mean,
That's the
I just
reason.
think it needs
This
to be
is my point.
really well explained.
That's
because-
why you do things at this table and you discuss them thoroughly at this table before you go off and take action. So at least the 4 or 5 members of the Board of Selectmen understand what's going on.
I understand.
If you look, the first consent agenda will be the moderators, what she's looking for,
Right.
such as the elections
Got
and
it.
such.
Yeah,
Right. Then
that's
she-
easy.
Then
But-
she's going to ask for a second one. That's articles that even if we were doing the budget, even if the budget was all set, we
Right.
would not be hearing, we would be passing over these, and these are departmental ones.
So I don't like the word Passover. It sort of reminds me of ancient times. Are we
Easter.
moving it to a different time?
These would not come back. These would not come back this fiscal year. If we were to hear them.
No, they would come back in October
In
or November. But we
October.
are not,
How about this?
can you help me with the terminology,
Sure.
sir?
Well, maybe. We've got 3 different categories of action. One is the consent agenda.
Yep.
Where a group of routine articles are being bundled together ostensibly for group and favorable action.
Right, got it.
Then there's a second consent agenda where some other articles are being bundled together because they're unnecessary for group and negative action.
They are unnecessary because they should have been placed on the October warrant.
Or could have been.
Or could have been.
Or are redundant.
We're going to change.
Some of them, we've done before is, we've had it in the budget, and these things come back in as a separate article
Right.
on them, so you're counting them twice.
Right, but I think it's very important, because if you've got 2 relatively intelligent human beings asking you to please explain it, you're going to have 250 people
It's not
Throwing-
complete, it's not completely
Easy.
clear. It's
Throwing their hands up was what I said.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Well, I'll say this, Madam Moderator's better explaining this stuff than any of us.
Okay, but
So,
you understand
thank
my
God for
concern
that.
of it, yeah.
Absolutely. And then there's the third category, which
But,
would be a motion
Mr.
to
Chairman, with all due
continue,
respect, did you not say you were
table
making this
the
motion?
financial articles.
Yes.
Until
I've been
June
asked-
17th or 18th or whatever it is.
Right. So I think those are your
Okay.
three group
Okay.
actions.
Thank you.
Just so,
So
Would've
positive,
been easier
negative,
because you
table.
used the-
Mr. Chairman, Madam Moderator is going to explain, when she asked for the first consent agenda, she's going to go down each article and explain why she's placing those in the consent agenda.
She will
When
do the same for the second one as well.
Okay.
Then the third one would be up to whether the BOS would want to step forward and ask for the budget, or if you will, the rest of the monetary articles to be moved to a town meeting held on June 18th.
It's not a town meeting, it's the continuation of this town meeting that will be
It
continued
will
on
not
June
be an
18th.
additional one, it will be a continued.
It's a continued session. It's very important to make sure that everybody gets that we're not adjourned, right?
Correct.
We will not be adjourning.
Right. I'm happy now. I mean, I understand it now, thank you. But I think that it's important that, well, I'm sure she's going to explain it. You all set?
Okay. Next item up is discussion on guidance to town administrator for the next year. I'd say at this point here, we need to get through town meeting, and then we can go from there on April 30th. We'll pick this back up.
Yes. Can I just ask him one question?
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's in order or not. Have we had any further updating of the financial reports that are available to you? What is the latest financial information available to you? Let me ask it that way.
The last one's through January, it's in the documents I handed out to you. But it also includes the transfers on there. The transfers meaning those are the departments that we believe will need transfers. The police, as of right now, again, they look in a spot where they will be in deficit. We are working with them. I've already spoken to DOR about it. We've had memos on it, and we're working with the chief. So it's not something that we've just let go. We've got memos dated back from December,
Okay.
when it first started looking like there's an issue.
Okay. Are there, the department responsible for creating these reports is working at maximum, and we're giving it every bit of help that we can?
The accounting department, yes, when they're bringing them. And then what happens is the accounting office gives me the information, and I will routinely write a memo to it. This time I did not write a memo. I only listed the transfers, as those are what looks like would be an issue.
Okay,
according
no,
to
I
the
think
FAA.
what I'm saying is whoever is in the office is working to maximum capacity and beyond to bring us current to April 22nd.
Or you'll always be at least 45 days behind, unless, if you had a couple extra staff that worked on there, because we're routinely at least 30 days behind.
Yes.
You'll never be exactly right on.
You have to be behind a little bit.
Well, a little bit in 30 days
Right.
are entirely different things.
Question.
Yeah, January and 30 days, you're right. It's two different things.
Mr. Sullivan, do we have any money left in the budget? We had money before for someone coming in as help because we didn't have the cost of the full town accountant, because they had gone by the wayside. So do we still have money in our appropriation available there?
For the town account,
Town accountant?
I would say we're using those for transfers, and we've transferred the money from accounting salary into expenses to pay for what we use to have the tax rate set and the closing of the year-end books.
I would say that we probably, if we can find some funding, to see if we can get someone to come back in to help a little bit, so we can get someone dedicated, because the statements we're just getting January, and it's a problem because we have to sit there and,
Right.
we're looking at stuff we know we have, but we have one department that we're over, and we have others, we're gonna have to figure where we could be maxed out and have an issue come
Right.
June.
Again, I'm not being critical of anybody. I'm
No,
just
it's
asking
just,
the question, how can we help get the records in a timely fashion?
This is something that we need to look at short-term and long-term? How do we get this to the
Right.
point that when the month closes,
That's correct.
15 days later, we have some kind of statements?
Well, the long term, we heard from the FinCom at the Wednesday meeting when they talked about our dinosaur software, so that's something we need to think about. It's probably a lot easier to get snapshots if you get the right tools.
Well, we can discuss that.
Yeah.
I think we'll discuss it,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
up with a game plan that the town administrator is happy with. Just ask, we'd like to have stuff in a certain time frame, and then
Could we
come
put
back
it,
and tell us
would
how
it
we
be
can do
proper
it.
to put it on an agenda just as a report in a couple of weeks or something to see?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See what is available and how we could get some help
Yeah,
to
just,
these people. Again, I'm not trying to make your life more difficult or turn your hair gray, but I want the work done so that I know what I'm talking about. And you know what you're talking about.
yeah, it makes it very difficult when we have to sit there.
You cannot run a business.
And look there with no answer.
You
Anybody
cannot
say
run
my
a business
information's
with
5 months
90-day
old.
old information. You can't.
Doesn't work. Can't work, so.
No, things can really go awry in 90 days, and you wouldn't even track it until you're 90 days out from it, so
And then you're
that's too late.
done.
Let's
I
just,
get my stuff on the last day of the month, but understanding those 30 days are
you,
unqualified, then you
Yes.
can change in that
Right.
30, but
it's
prior to
like,
30, we should have that.
it's like a draft, but
Yeah, yeah.
unfortunately, we're dealing with a lot of, the town of Wareham has a lot of paperwork and a lot of entries and stuff
Yeah.
to do. And the system doesn't, I don't think allows it to happen quick enough.
I'm not sure where my question falls, whether it's under E or F, but I have a real concern about this whole Heman school business. We were given a letter that the school, from the school superintendent, that they were turning that building back over to the town. They were no longer going to use it for the
Right.
school department.
You talking about the Hammond?
Hammond School. And this falls under either guidance for you, I think it's both, E and F, so.
He's got a different agenda than you and I do.
Oh, he does?
You do have a different one than I do.
got E and F.
You know why? You people have a draft agenda. You probably printed the draft. If you look in your packets, you got the final.
He just gave me the same one I'm using,
Oh, okay.
so.
This is the one that
I've got the same one, Mr. Holmes.
And now
Mrs.
I do.
Whiteside has
I'm
it.
fine.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, we get this letter that says that the school superintendent is turning this building back over to the town, right?
Yep.
Next thing we know, we sat down, the Board of Selectmen sat with CETA to talk with Mr. Peener and Gene to see what CETA could come up with for uses of that building to generate some revenue. Because they can do that. Now, I believe I recall seeing a letter where the school department took the building back and said, we're not going to give it to you. And now, we just got a report from CETA telling us what their initial ideas are, who they've talked to about, leasing space in that building to businesses, some education stuff. And then we find that nowhere in that report was anything about the Boys and Girls Club. Now we find that the Boys and Girls Club has some deal to lease part of that building.
4 rooms.
With the school committee.
Yeah,
So-
but, excuse me, my understanding
Have I
is,
still got the floor?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Please.
Because I want to get the whole story out.
Oh, yeah.
Before being interrupted. So I send Mr. Peener from CETA a note saying, hey, I just read in the newspaper where the Boys and Girls Club are leasing part of that building. Nowhere in CETA's report does it say that the gym and 4 classrooms or whatever is being leased out to the Boys and Girls Club. So, yeah, right. That's what I did when I read this. And so now all of a sudden, the school committee apparently, or the school department, or somebody has decided to lease part of this building out to the Boys and Girls Club. So, under E, I would say to you, as the town administrator and the keeper of the buildings, is this building worthy of rental? What kind of issues are there with this building? I understand the roof is a problem. Why are we entering into lease agreements with people if that building is not structurally sound? You get into leases with people, and then next thing you know, you need a roof. Who's paying for all these repairs and things? And the second issue would be under the budget, F, where is all this money coming from? Where is it all going? Are these enterprise funds, slush funds, whatever you want to call them? Where the expenses to keep that building open versus what these people are paying? Who authorized all this? I'd like to see all that in a report to this board.
The other question I want to know is how long the lease is, because I've read two different figures and one of them is illegal.
It was this thing, I never saw any public notices in the
No,
paper
there weren't
like I
any.
just saw for, well, you can't lease town property without a public notice.
Well, you can't lease it for the period that they apparently leased it for without going to
So a
town
lot of
meeting.
questions here, Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Chairman, and they both fall under E and F. And these are some pretty serious issues, and I just want to be clear for the record, I am not against the Boys and Girls Club. I support them very well through Mrs. Sullivan, and I'm wondering why we're taking these kids from here, which is a great location, down to Onset, in a building that we're not even sure is structurally sound. The school department didn't want it, because one, it was too expensive to keep, and they didn't have the money, and they didn't have the blah, blah, right? Now, all of a sudden, it's good enough? I got a lot of questions here about this.
Would it be appropriate to ask for the person whoever supposedly,
Is the contract manager for the town
Yeah, but he
right
didn't.
there.
I've not signed a
he
lease.
didn't have anything to do with it, so I think we have to have the person who was responsible for it.
He's the chief procurement officer, last I checked. and-
I understand that, but what I'm saying is I think that it was not done according to Hoyle.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's why I'm asking the questions.
I think that what we need to do, first of all, is to find out what the status of the building actually is. Is the building back on the town administrator's side because they turned it back in? If they took it back again, was notification proper and everything else? If they've turned it back and they're leasing it out, we have to find out what their jurisdiction is, because that building basically is for, school. And if they're changing it, for something different than that, do they have the right to do that? And it's really something, do they have the right to do that? Do they have the right to enter into a lease on a building like that, et cetera? There's a lot of legal issues here, and Mass General Law, I'm sure, comes in somewhere.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
A couple things. On the,
Can you turn the microphone, please?
sure. Well, I got 'em all. On the custody of the property, in order to complete the transfer of land from the school department to the Board of Selectmen, you'd have to follow the process set out in Chapter 40, Section 15A. And that begins with a vote by the school committee to declare it surplus, and it concludes with a town meeting vote transferring formal custody of the building from the school department for school purposes to the Board of Selectmen for whatever purpose.
Which is not happening.
Maybe you misunderstood the question.
No,
The
no, no.
question has nothing to do with turning it to the Board of Selectmen. It has to do with turning it to the town of Wareham. It's town of Wareham property.
Well, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, every piece of property has to have a particular custodian. And when a custodian holds a piece of land, the custodian holds it for particular purposes. So in this case, the school department attempted to say, or at one point said, we don't want it for school purposes anymore. There's then a formal process for them to follow to divest themselves of their ownership of it. Before that process was complete, the school said, well, wait a minute, we've had a second thought. And so there is no article on town meeting
Well,
that
see, that's,
transfers
again, Mr. Chairman,
custody.
again, that's where I have to stop our learned friend, because we got the letter. I've never seen another letter, and I don't know if another formal vote was taken rescinding that letter. Next thing I saw was the lease, they're leasing this property.
But that's a
So
fair-
I would think there would have been a formal vote to send us the letter, which we got. And then there would have had to been another formal vote from another party saying, hey, we take it back. Or it would have been at this board level to say, hey, we got it, if you want it back. You see what I mean?
Oh, I see exactly what
There
you
is a
mean.
bunch of steps missing there.
Sure.
Over the custody of the property.
Sure.
And,
And of course, all I'm doing is just describing the legal
Yeah.
framework.
Am I correct about anything over 5 years has to be before town meeting?
Well, that's my next one. Chapter 40, Section 3, that deals with the town's power to hold, lease, and convey property. There is a section in here that deals with school buildings not in actual use, and if I may, I'll read it. Notwithstanding the provisions of this section, a city or town with the approval of the school committee may rent or lease any school building not in actual use with the approval of the Commissioner of Education, surplus space in a school building in actual use to any one or more public or private profit-making businesses or nonprofit organizations, provided, however, that joint occupancy of a school building in actual use, we don't care about that. The terms of any such rental or lease shall be as approved by the school committee, provided, however, that no school building not in actual use shall be rented or leased for an initial term longer than 10 years, but with renewal options if approved by the school committee. So, there are at least two interesting points to pull from this. It says a city or town with the approval of the school committee. The leasing agency in this case is the town, and for purposes of Chapter 40, Section 3, the town is you. So the lease, to properly follow the lease process, you would have to have a lease approved by the school committee, perhaps even signed by the school committee, but also signed by the Board of Selectmen or its designee, because it says the town with the approval of the school committee. That's what the statute says. So the Board of Selectmen with the approval of the school committee may
Where does our charter and bylaws kick in that's in addition to this?
Well,
This doesn't replace the charter.
as to conveyance or disposal of property, yeah, it does. This is
So even though we have a bylaw in town that's different than that, more restrictive.
I guess I'd have to take a
maybe.
look at the bylaw.
If we had a bylaw that was more restrictive, what governs?
Well, I'd really have to look at the bylaw because usually a bylaw that's in conflict with state law gives way. So what I'd be doing is I'd be looking to see whether there was a direct conflict or whether it fit between the cracks, if you will. So this lease, it would need the signatures not only of the school committee, but if it's to be effective, it would require your signatures. The term, it does not have to go to town meeting if the term is
Less than 10.
less than 10. If ultimately, if there are going to be a whole series of options for renewal that could take it up, I think your first 10 years are probably okay. But before a subsequent 10-year, I'm going to say a 10-year period kicks in, that would have to come back to town meeting. So if you signed it and the school committee has signed it, it's good for 10.
We haven't even seen it.
Haven't seen it.
We have not.
So,
Well,
that's the way the statute.
That's a very, very good point, Mr. Holmes, thank you.
I think the
Well, I'm just concerned, they vacate this building, they get down there, we got a problem, they need a roof, there's no money for a roof. We're trying to maintain the buildings we got. And they're out using another building, they said
Well,
was in
they,
disrepair.
if what you're saying is correct, the process has not been correctly followed, and
Right.
they can't do what they think they've done.
So I'd hate to see these young folks packing their bags and moving and get there and the lease isn't even legit. So
Maybe with Mr. Sullivan, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, maybe with Mr. Sullivan on Thursday, perhaps he and I could visit with the superintendent and just review the procurement process, if that's acceptable to the TA and the board.
I'd like to get something, if I
Procurement process has
could
to
recommend that we
evolve.
get something in writing back, not just a discussion, but something in writing to address all of this.
Mr. Holmes, this will be on next week's agenda.
Well, it's on this week's agenda too. Because this all deals with FY14, expenses in that building, maintaining that building, cost. If there are repair issues, where's the money gonna come from now that you've leased this place out to it's all part of this budget. Revenues are being taken in, that's an in bucket in somebody's budget in 14. Where's it going?
Back on our agenda.
That's all I had for the budget. Sorry.
Thank you.
Any other town business? Town administrator's report?
I think we've been looking at town meeting too much, but you do have in there a list of what the transfers will be. and a list of January's revenue and expenditures reports to go over.
I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Moved.
You're gonna see Russia from your back porch.
Second.
You're all set? All in
Yeah.
favor?
Are you gonna see Russia?
Thank you.
I'm going to Anchorage and Denali and then down the